Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host, Anna, and this week I bring to you another very emotional episode. Maybe this is just the name of this podcast now. The name of the game with this podcast is just being really emotional all the time. But no, for real. I know last week was a heavy episode, some non-fic on some feminism and some horror in America, but we're going to shift tones a little bit with our emotionality this week. We're going to get a little sappy, and if you like dogs, you might want to be careful. This week I am interviewing Neil McRobert, Mr. Talking Scared himself on this podcast. Somebody who I feel fortunate enough to call a friend, about his debut novella, Good Boy. If you don't know about Good Boy yet, my God, let me tell you about it. It is a wonderful novella. It might be the most perfect novella that I've ever read, as my peers also agree. We've talked about it at length. It has been, well, actually, it's going to release from Wild Hunt Books, which is a part of they created this project called the Northern Weird Project, which is spotlighting authors in the north of England, which, Neil, you fall into that category. And so this novella, Good Boy, is part of that project. And there's plenty of other fantastic books that are and stories that are part of that collection. They're all novellas, I believe, technically. But you should definitely check them out. You should pre-order, the remainder that are left, and you should definitely pick up Good Boy. Me and Neil talk about his work at length, and I think it's a really cool interview because I have been a fan of Neil's for a long time in the podcasting world, and then I was fortunate enough to get to know him a bit and meet him in StokerCon this year. And like I said, I think that I'm lucky enough to get to call him a friend now. So getting to see this book or this story come out into the world is a really, really cool thing, knowing what the story means to Neil and everything else. So yeah, we're going to get into all of it. Worry not. I think it's a really cool episode. It's one of my favorites myself, one that I hold dear to my heart. So I hope that you all enjoy it as much as I do, and I'll chat with you guys now. Good morning, Neil. How are you?
Good morning, Anna. Well, good afternoon from me
Yeah.
to you, but good morning for you. How are you?
I'm doing so fabulous. I am so thrilled that one, I'm talking to you in general, because I consider you a friend, and two, that we're talking about you writing fiction and the release of your novella, Good Boy, today. How does that feel for you?
It feels really bizarre. I'm going to have to fight the natural British inclination to self-deprecate today
Yeah.
because I constantly feel the need to downplay everything because it's a
Yeah.
novella and it's my first one, and I know that I'm supposed to be really bombastic and enthusiastic, and that's not my natural personality when talking about myself. So I'll have to fight to overcome that.
Well, I think people know, you've been podcasting for a while now. I think some people have gotten to know you in some proximity to know that that's how you feel. So
Hmm.
it's all going to be very natural. But at any rate, just to open up, how does it feel? I mean, you've already said it feels a little strange to be sitting on this side of the podcasting mic.
Yeah.
But are you prepared? Are you nervous? How does it feel for you?
I'm not nervous, but it only because I don't really ever think. That's my main problem in life, is I don't think. I just do. So I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about the book today with Anna. And then it dawned on me like 7 minutes ago, oh, she might ask me questions that I need to answer. And for example, you may ask me to synopsize this book in some degree. And I'm like, I don't have an elevator pitch for this book. I don't have a way. So it's only just dawned on me now that I may have to actually say things about the book.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just a few,
Yeah.
not too many. We'll try and keep it pain-free.
We'll muddle through together.
Okay. Well, the reason that we are here to talk today is about Good Boy, your novella debut release with Wild Hunt Books. And it's part of the Northern Weird Project, which I think is a very, very cool project. I've read one other novella from that collection, and I think it's a stunning, stunning project. I wanted to kind of open up, and before we get into the specifics of Good Boy, and ask you how it feels to have your debut publishing with a publisher that's based where you're at. We've talked about feeling remote and stuff and very specific to where we're at. So I imagine this kind of feels special, right?
It's very cool. So it came about in a weird way. And it just shows, I think, the journey to this book existing shows that you never know what's going to come out of doing someone a good turn.
Hmm.
So I didn't know anything about Wild Hunt books, except for there was a book came out last year called Bear Season
Yeah, I
by
remember.
Gemma Fairclough, who is a Manchester-based writer. And for those who don't know, I'm based in the north of England, in the countryside outside Manchester. Um, and so I'm always up for supporting like local writers and stuff. And this book came out and it sounded really cool. It sounded kind of like a bit like like House of Leaves light with lots of footnotes and stuff, but it's also set in the Alaskan wilderness and I love all of that stuff. Anyway, I kind of went to bat for a little bit. I reviewed it, I put it in an article I wrote for Vulture. I just kind of fell into communication with Wild Hunt and Ariel, who is the kind of the one woman dynamo behind Wild Hunt. Um, and she asked me to be part of this project. And so for a start, it shows that, do people a good turn and you reap dividends. 'Cause it put me on their sort of radar. And then Ariel told me she was moving the company from London up to very close to where I live in the north of England. And she's now made that move. And I know that she's basically launching this project to kind of commemorate that move. So it feels cool because it feels like something is actually not just in the north, but moving from the south to the north, which feels nice because we do exist up here. We have indoor
Yeah.
toilets and everything these days. Um, so, I say that because my best friend from university sincerely asked me when I first met him, "Do you have indoor toilets where you live?" I'm like, "We have the wheel too." Um, but yeah, so to answer your question, that I've gone off the radar. It's great to be writing for about the North for a Northern company in company with other great Northern writers. It feels nice. It does, yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, with their move closer to you and closer to the north, it feels like the genesis of something, and I imagine that's pretty nifty to be part of.
And Wild Hunt are incredible. I mean, Ariel does like she's a one-woman team and it's amazing, but like I, I don't describe them as a small press. I describe them as kind of like a boutique press because it feels
Yeah.
like the project is incredibly well curated. The production values are like next level. I mean, anyone who's seen the covers of this series of stories, there's like a real vision behind them. Louise, who designed my covers, I'm so happy with it. And my actual dog is the dog on the. I'm sure Ted will come up again, but he's the dog on the cover. So there's that real personal touch. So it feels like working with as a debut, it feels like it could not have been a better situation because it's like a really personal relationship between me and Ariel running the company. It's not like there's no corporate machinery or layers of interaction. It's very like one-on-one. She's been incredible and helpful with all the business side too, advising me on like agents and like rights and library stuff. And it could not have been a better introduction because despite interviewing writers for 5 years, I know nothing about the industry beyond like the publicist,
Yeah.
because that's the person I speak to.
Yep.
I have no idea how a book comes to be. So it's been a lovely hand-holding way into the industry.
Yeah, that kind of inadvertently like answers my next question because that was, I imagine you and I probably have similar experiences with, looking at things a certain way from where we used to sit,
Mhm.
where used to sit. And so I imagine the viewpoint's a little bit different, knowing much more about what goes into all this. And I was kind of curious how knowing that process, being part of that process has like changed your outlook, maybe on interviewing or on reading, or quite frankly, anything to do with the book space, knowing what you know now, having written something like this and getting it published.
Um, I mean, if anything, I'm even more in awe of novelists
Yeah.
because this is a novella and I wrote it fast and I wrote it in a way that I was very pleased with. And it was a simultaneously I was both panic stricken and full of joy when doing it, which is how I do most things. But I'm like, how does anyone do this over like 400 pages? And
Yeah.
so I'm more in awe of novelists. But I also the whole thing about kill your darlings,
Hmm.
like it's really made me realize that because I've written a lot of stuff. I write for editors, I write for journalism a lot, and I
Yeah.
never particularly care. Right, if I write like a journalistic piece and someone's like, "Well, this is too flowery, this is too long-winded, they've got to truncate it," I'm like, "Yeah, fine," because for me, basically, that job is money. Like, I'm doing it
Yep.
because I want to be paid. Right, so like, yeah, whatever. Like, make the edit. I don't care. Just give me some cash. Um, but this is kind of, it's my heart cut out of my body and put on a page. So and you've crafted these sentences for what you think is like the perfect effect and all of that. And Ariel has been like the most generous but rigorous editor. And because my story's got a lot of timeline issues, she really made me think about that. And I think it's probably a bit of a trite answer because everyone should think this anyway, but it's really made me value what an editor does
Yeah.
to make these books, what we receive at the end, because I can only imagine when you're reading a really big 600-page novel or something, the amount of work that goes in, and the to and fro, and how difficult it must be for writers who don't agree with the editors, and that must be a
Yeah.
nightmare.
That's the thing is like, I'm staring down my TBR and I see how big like King Sorrow by Joe Hill is,
Mm,
right? And I'm like,
mm,
how do you edit that? Like,
yeah,
how do you, sentence on sentence level, how do you edit that? And then in grand scheme of things, how do you edit something as big as that? So,
hmm
I've definitely gotten appreciation and I only can imagine the writing process and going through the publishing process. You'd see even more on a minute and grander scale in different ways how that all plays out. So
yeah,
that's an answer
completely.
that makes sense to me and that I expected, but I definitely get it.
Mm.
It's kind of like magic, it feels like. But I'm gonna ask you the dreaded question now, to synopsize Good Boy. And if you're not ready, I can do my very best, but I don't want to accidentally spoil anything. So,
No, my thing with this is that since the start, I've struggled with one question. So I'm going to answer this question right. And if you think I've ruined things for someone, you tell me we'll do it again, right?
okay, perfect.
Because there is a central issue with this that I've got to address. You understand, right? Basically, the story is set in a small town, in a
Hmm.
small northern English town. It's essentially the town I grew up in, right?
Yep,
I now live 10 miles down the road from that town, but it's like a different world.
yep.
Um, the town I grew up in was incredibly inward looking and retrograde and unprogressive. I still things I love. I do there are things I love too, but I have thoughts. And it's about a man who is stuck in this town, and it's about why he's stuck in this town. And without giving too much away, the book opens with a woman looking through a window at this piece of sort of unused green land called the square, um, with the sort of swing set on it and a one tree. And the week before, a little boy has gone missing and hasn't been found. And that night, she's looking at the window and she sees a man digging a hole under a tree. And she thinks, what the hell is he burying? Right? So she goes out and she meets him and he's not burying a child, shall we say that? And she invites him into her house and he tells her the story of what's really happening in this small town and what's happening to these kids. Because this is not the only kid that's gone missing. So in some ways, it's my attempt to compact Stephen King's It into a novella in the north of England. Um, so here's the part that I'll say out loud, and I don't know if I should, but it's to answer a question that a lot of people seem concerned about. The
Hmm.
book's called Good Boy. There is a dog on the cover. Anyone who's listened to me talk about horror ever knows that I am destroyed by animal suffering and animal death in books. Um, the the dog. Oh, what should I say, Anna?
Hey there. Sorry to interrupt. It's Anna from the future? No, I don't know. Present Anna. past Anna by the time that you listen to this from the editing bay, saying that if you don't want to have any spoilers or even any inclinations as to what happens to the dog in Good Boys, skip ahead to around 18-minute, 15-second mark just to be safe. We don't say anything outright, but even still, if you want to be extra, extra careful, skip ahead.
What should I say? Do you think I
So,
need to say?
okay, well, so somebody asked me, somebody said,
Hmm.
and we'll cut this if we need to, but somebody messaged me and they said, having read this, does the dog die? I don't know if I can read it if the dog dies. And I said, that's a loaded question. I said, that's a very messy, complicated question. I said, there is a death of sorts. However, this book reads like a warm hug for your grieving
Hmm.
heart. Um, it's not, there's this story takes place over a long period of time. It's not, without some heartbreak and some loss, but Neil does a very good job of bringing it full circle. That was my response, basically. Um, it's a I like what you did, and anybody I'm trying to remember. It's called like A Dog's Life or A Dog's Journey. It was a book that came out a long time ago, and it was made into a movie.
I know the
You know
one.
what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? Yeah,
Yeah.
and you kind of play with some of the same like the same iteration of that a little bit, but like on a much, more emotional, philosophical,
Mm.
darker level. But it's
Mm.
still really beautiful. So I know a lot of people want to know because they're like, I just don't know if I can take it. I think that this is the kind of book that you can take in the right headspace because it is so heartfelt and you handle it with such care and love. And one of my other points that I was going to bring up whenever I was going to talk to you, I interviewed Stephen Graham Jones a few weeks back, and he joked that he writes love stories, right? He doesn't write horror, he writes love stories, and I think you're pulling the same card as him. I think that Good Boy is a love story disguised in horror, and I don't know if you agree with that sentiment or not, but
I very much do agree with that sentiment. Yeah. I never really thought of this as a horror story.
hmm
Um, at all. I never really wanted it to be frightening,
yeah,
particularly. Um, I wanted it to be moving and sad and celebratory. Um, yeah, in terms of the dog, put it this way: there is a dog. He's a very brave, good boy. Um, there is also death in this novel of many kinds, but this is not a book in which I intend to jump all over your heart with cruelty. I think that's the best I can say, you know. It's not a cruel book. It's the opposite of a cruel book, or at least I intend it to be. I think that's the most I can say. It's just
I
really
think
funny that loads of people write to me going like, "Oh, at least I know I can read your book because I know what that you know." Like, oh God, um, yeah.
no, I think that that's the best way to put it, honestly. I
Mm.
think I think that there's a way to kind of handle death, in horror and all of fiction. Typically, like the vulnerable death, like child death, animal death. There's a way to do it. There's many ways to do it. And the way
Mm.
that you do it is very graceful and very loving.
Well, thank you.
So it's not for no reason. There's no drawn out suffering. There's no, So again,
But it
I
will make
think,
you cry, bitches. It will
yep,
make you cry.
it will. I can confirm. Okay, so I'm gonna jump back now. How long do you feel like you've been carrying this story with you? Because it feels like there's a strong piece of yourself in the story. We all know how much you love Ted. We
Mhm.
all know, the love of dog. I mean, we're talking about it right now, the love of dogs and things like that. So is this something that stuck with you for a while, or, how did this come to be?
Weirdly, no, no. It basically came to me on a complete whim. So I walk Ted every day.
Yeah.
I take him up to a often to a park at the back of my house just over there. Um, that's great for an audio medium. Me going and pointing just over there. It's a park near my house, and it basically is it's the piece of land that is in the book. And I go there and I listen to podcasts all the time because I have a, if not ADHD brain, then the next best thing. And I can't be allowed to have my own thoughts. That is just, I haven't had a thought in 20 years. I have stimulus. Um, but this day I was walking Ted and my earphones like ran out of battery. So I was like, oh Christ, I've got to actually think. So I was just throwing the ball around. This is about, I mean, I wrote the book last summer. But this will have only been a few months before that. I'm throwing the ball for Ted, and there's a tree. There's a single tree, and because this is an example of why I shouldn't be allowed to think because my brain is so macabre. I thought to myself, when Ted dies, my dog's 5, but I live every day with the threat of his mortality. Um, I'm like, I'm gonna,
I think as any good loving dog owner does, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. I was like, I'm gonna bury him under that tree. And then I thought to myself, well, what would the neighbors think? And I had image of someone looking out the window and think, what's that dude? What's that guy doing right on this public land? And from that, it takes me about 20 minutes to walk home from that park, and I had the full story
Yeah.
by the time I came home. And that never happens because
Hmm.
the reason I don't write much, or the reason I start and don't finish anything, is because I often have like a situational idea, but I don't have a story. And because I can't think, I think in the doing. I always have. I formulate my thoughts in either talking or in writing. I cannot just sit and think.
Yeah.
So I never have a story. I've got like a situation. Whereas with that, for some reason, it just leapt unbidden into my mind, and I had the full story. So writing it was actually, I mean, there were reasons it was difficult to do with time and deadlines, but it just sort of flowed. There was never a point where I was confused what would happen next or what the direction was. I knew how to tell the story, which was an absolute blessing because I didn't have long.
Yeah. I relate to what you say. Like you sometimes you get these ideas that are like, oh, this would make a great story idea and you've
Mm.
got a set piece to center it around, but very rarely I think does inspiration come fully formed like
Yeah.
that. And so when it hits, it feels very important, to like go write that down immediately,
Hmm.
right?
Mm.
Um what would you say is maybe the most challenging part of the writing process that you experienced with writing this piece of fiction?
So that's an interesting one because this is the first piece of fiction where I didn't feel my normal challenges.
Hmm.
So to elaborate on that, I know I talk too much, but forgive me.
Neil, this is what this is for. We are here to hear
Literally,
you talk.
but you'll be amazed how much more efficient I'll get in subsequent interviews. But you're getting like the full unedited, like director's cut version here. Um, Normally my problem is that I I do allow perfection to get in the way of the good. So I have a very particular way of writing that I aim for maximum fluidity
Hmm.
between points. And I think it comes from my academic background where
Yeah.
everything has to be almost logically linear and teleological.
Yep.
So I never want to move on until something is perfect. And that's difficult in two directions. One, it means the writing process is a nightmare. And then if you have to edit to someone else's, discretion or brief, when you've written something that is so or is aimed for such fluidity and fluency where everything leads into the next, how the hell do you edit that? Because you pull on one string and Christ, you got to rewrite the entire thing.
Yep.
So I've always hamstrung myself by the Joe Lansdale effect because Joe does the same thing. He makes everything perfect before he proceeds, but Joe Lansdale is Joe Lansdale and I'm not. And so I get to the point where I'm like, all right, I've written 30,000 words and I've edited it to a high sheen, but I've exhausted it or I have burned out on the idea. I've kind of killed it. Um, I didn't have that issue with this because
Hmm.
I only had a few weeks to write this. I mean, I was given an ample sort of deadline for the length of it, but I had so much podcast work to do and I had so much pre-established deadlines on other pieces of work
Yeah.
that I didn't get going on it until quite late. And Ariel was very kind and gave me an extension. But I basically wrote the entire thing, I think, in less than 6 weeks. Which to the Stephen Graham Jones amongst us is nothing. He could knock out in a weekend, right? But it takes me a while. And as it went along, what was quite freeing but terrifying at the time, my wife was so supportive. She's got like a whiteboard and was like giving me like deadlines on words and days, and it was great. But I did most of it between the hours of like midnight and 4 a.m. because that's when I'm at my most
Yeah.
efficient. And I didn't have time to go down any fruitless cul-de-sacs. Everything had to be to the point and worthwhile because I didn't have time to go back and undo something and try different things. So it took away my options. I had to just write the story in kind of quite an efficient way. And it was really freeing because I literally did just sit there and knock out 1,800 words in a night and then not over edit it and then move on. And it forced me to write in a way I wouldn't normally write, which made me actually get the damn thing finished. So that's the opposite answer to your question, because that's not a challenge, that's a benefit. The main challenge with this one was the timeline stuff,
Yeah.
because the structure is such that Jim, the protagonist, is telling this his story in the first person, but he I want it to be as much as possible like how someone does tell a story, where it is the thoughts are not always organized in this perfect linear way. Um, and obviously you are in some way adherent to the rules of, narrative. You can't be completely chaotic. So it does progress in like a, I think in a logical way. But there are parts where he will tell something and then we'll be like, yeah, but actually, whilst that was happening, this other thing was happening. Or actually 6 months before that, this thing happened. And I wanted that to read quite natural, but also to be easily understandable
Hmm.
to the reader. Um, and Ariel helped with that a lot in tidying up some of that where it got a bit wiggy.
Yeah.
But that was the challenge, making sure that the readers knew when stuff was happening and really like what the time jumps were between each section of his story. That was easily the biggest challenge. You should have seen like the spreadsheets I had with like dates and stuff. And I was also trying to tie it into real incident.
Yeah.
So, like, one of the things in the background of all of this are the Moors murders, which I don't know
Yes.
if you know about that, Anna, but here in the UK, we had these horrendous murders in the 60s. And I wanted to tie it into that because that was happening very, very close to here into the setting of the story. And it's so topically pertinent that I thought it would be a mistake not to nod to that. But that then meant configuring other things so it fell perfectly in line with the dates. And yeah,
Right.
so that was the main challenge.
Yeah, well, I mean, things like that, they can't not have an impact on you
Hmm.
growing up and like hearing about them, even, if they've happened however many years before your time. I mean, you hear about it, and that has an effect. But I think the really interesting thing that you say about, your challenge with the timing and stuff and kind of nailing Jim's conversational voice and being clear is like, that is one of my favorite things about this novella is it is very much like I just sat you feel like you were Margie, you were sitting down at the kitchen table sharing a stiff drink and he's airing all of these things off of his chest for the first time. It is such a palpable feeling that comes off the page. I don't know how you did it quite exactly, but it is such a feeling of a man finally letting go of the story. And so that's why I kind of wondered if this story sat with you for a while, that you, like, in essence, you are also telling it in this way that's, okay, this is my story. I'm finally getting the space to tell it. Does that make sense?
It does. It's not my story. So Jim is based on a real person
Hmm.
who was called Jim Howarth. That's was his name. Um, and I was kind of, I mean, he didn't like, fight monsters in a small town, but he was a man who was stuck. He was my dad's best friend,
Yeah.
and he was always there in my life, and he was a man who was brilliant and bright and interesting and wonderful and kind, and he got stuck in this small town that I grew up in because of his mother was very ill and his dad died and his sister had various um, disabilities, and he got stuck there as looking after the family. And there's always a
Hmm.
sense of a life not wasted. It's all things to say, but a life unfairly circumscribed.
Yeah.
Um, so it was his story I was really thinking about, and I think in terms of like his voice, I tried as much as possible to conjure the voice of that generation of my father's peers and like in our
Yeah.
small town. Um, so I think that's where the voice came from. But it also came a lot, well, from reading a lot of Stephen King and a lot
Yeah.
of John Langan.
Hmm.
And the other person who doesn't get mentioned enough in terms of having a real knack for that conversational anecdotal storytelling is the author Michael Marshall Smith. And if I could recommend a series of stories, if you get the book, the book of Michael Marshall Smith, he has half a dozen stories in that best of.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just called The Best of Michael Marshall Smith, and he has half a dozen stories in there, which is quite similar. It's people in bars telling stories to other people with that homespun John Langan fisherman-esque vibe. And for example, I absolutely love Stephen King's stories set in the world of The Club, which is like, the club where people are, they go and they tell stories, and like the breeding method is set in there. And is the other one, is it The Fifth Quarter? No, The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands is the other one set in that world. Um and yeah, I love, there's something about that I think no matter how nasty a story may be, there is something in that when someone is telling a story in the story, it brings a comfort to the narrative, like a sort of coziness to the narrative that's quite immune to the horrors of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I think it's that maybe we think of storytelling as a comforting exercise, but I always feel cozy when someone is telling a story in a story. It's a feeling I love.
Yeah, I think in particular with Good Boy and the way that you set it up, we're sitting like in essence, if we are reading the story through Margie's eyes and ears as she's hearing it from Jim, we are in a cozy kitchen late at night
Hmm.
with a man who's like unburdening himself to her. There's something very safe about that instead of like us being like active in conflict, you know.
Yeah,
Although there
yeah,
were
yeah.
times when Jim is recounting that it does feel you got me a few times. Just the way, quite literally on the sentence level, and I've talked to a few friends about it who have read it as well. On the sentence level, the way that you set up and I don't want to give away what it is, but your big bad that
Hmm.
is encountered, the way that he appears, the way that he operates, his essence, you do a very good job
Oh,
of
thank you,
establishing
thank you.
his malevolence. So, but no, I get what you're saying, and there's very much a John Lang the John Langan quality of it as well. But there's shared DNA with From a Buick Gate as well, and I know how much you love that book.
Yes, yeah.
But it feels like that looking back on with whatever strange like reverence or feeling that tenderness. There's a sadness, there's a poignancy. I think that all comes through on the page very, very clearly from my reading experience.
Thank you. That's my favorite tone in horror. This is why I'm a Stephen King fan above all else.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people think that if you're a Stephen King fan, that I think there's often a vibe that sometimes, oh well, that's because he's popular. It's like, no, 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 no. I love Stephen King. I have reasons, and it is exactly that. It's the fact that he prioritizes the full range of human emotion, not just fear.
Yep.
And books that are monomaniacally about terror or trauma kind of bore me.
Hmm.
I like things to be an ebb and flow. This is a rant I've done a lot recently in various venues about the fact that horror novels not only don't have to be, but I don't think should ever really be monotonally grim.
Yep.
Because I think there needs to be ebb and flow. Even in a horror novel, people can have a good day or a good hour, or they can have a laugh. They can find something funny. They can find a moment of joy. I always say when you read Pet Sematary, the bleakest of bleak books, that family are pretty happy at the start, right? And I think now and again there's a book where it's like, monotonal horror, like the Misery, for example. But generally, I think the ebb and flow of light and dark and the full palette of emotional states can only make a story more powerful, whether it's horror or not. But certainly in horror, I don't ever want to write something which is just one note thudding. This is terrible.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Well, it's one of those things that, you can't have darkness without light and the
Hmm.
other, the yin and yang of it, right? Like the best way in my opinion, not tell, but to show horror or terror or like, raise the stakes is to make you care and make you
Hmm.
love, which is the
Hmm.
exact opposite. So very much what you do is we very much care for Jim and Riot. We love them. We know what it's like to be as devoted as Jim is to Riot. Dog people, I mean, and cat people too, but whatever. We know what that's like. So immediately there's an ethos there that raises the stakes of God, I care for these people. I hope nothing happens to them. And I think that's what I think that you and I have that same sentiment about horror, and that's what we take away is whenever there's the real humanity, the real lifelikeness of
Yeah.
it, that it's not just, oh, I'm scared shitless this whole time. But to
Mm.
kind of bring it back a little bit more specifically to Good Boy, I want to talk about Riot and I want to talk about Ted and
Mm.
what Riot means to you. You know, what is that dog, that fictional dog mean to you?
Well, he essentially isn't a fictional dog. He's just my dog.
Yeah.
So like the one difference is that white patch of fur, which means so much in the story, but readers can discover that for themselves. Riot has a white patch of fur on his crown, which means something, whereas Ted doesn't. But they're the same dog. There's a reason Ted is actually on the cover, in character.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the book wouldn't exist without Ted. And I've kind of made a bit of a joke over the years about Ted being, this like, creature in my life but it's not a joke. Like, I love this dog. There's probably like five people alive who I wouldn't sacrifice for the well-being of Ted. Like, I love him to distraction, and he gives me utter joy. I mean, the book is dedicated to him, right?
Mhm.
And my wife gets a nod too, but mostly it's Ted. And Riot is not even particularly an idealized or or exaggerated version of him. All his characteristics are exactly the same. Like, I
Mhm.
just transpose my dog onto the page. Um, Riot may be a slight bit braver and more obedient than Ted. But I still think if Ted had to stand against what Riot stands against, I think Ted would give it a good go.
Yeah.
Um, but I just think there's something about, you know what? There is no getting away from the fact that I love Oi from the Dark Tower, right? There's
That
no, I
was
mean,
my
everyone
next
knows this,
question.
right?
This is my next
Yeah.
question.
And there's a line in the Dark Tower about Oi in which King writes that his heart, it's something like this might be a paraphrasing of it, but Oi's heart is so much bigger than the little body that holds it. Or the body is much smaller than the heart it holds, or some variation of that. And that's how I feel about Riot, that he is a little creature that um his diminutive stature is not really relevant to him. Like Jim is scared for Riot, but Riot doesn't care that like things are 20 times his size. He just literally guns for it. He just does his job. And I think there's something that the bravest thing I can think of when I think of bravery, not forget dogs, bravery just generally, you know, taking a stand against something that you have no chance of beating, but taking a stand anyway. I think that to me is perhaps the purest thing,
Yeah.
or the
I'm
thing
not
that
gonna lie.
I that makes me feel the most when I read a story. I just think like, we've all this is why I never get why people love the character of Jack Reacher, because Jack Reacher is literally never the underdog, right? You know what I mean? Like, and British people certainly like we love an underdog. Culturally, we love underdogs, and I think taking a stand against something that is so much bigger than you on a physical and cosmic scale, just there is no purer manifestation of heroism, and that's what Riot is to me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, you made me tear up. And like when I read Good Boy, there were many a times that I got teary-eyed. But hearing the conviction in which you speak about Ted and Riot and what this means to you, it all comes through in your writing and it comes through whenever you speak about it. I couldn't agree more. Obviously, I mean, it's the same takeaway that got me to cry at the end of it. I mean, we have that in common. Um, it's just I don't. It's so hard, and you talked to El Nash about cruelty to animals on
Mm,
your podcast, a long time
mm,
ago about like why that hurts so much. But like I also, on the flip side of that coin, I wonder what it is that is equally touching about this in particular. Like what is it about the smallest little thing that has the bravery and the courage to stand, you know what I'm saying? Like the
mm.
innocence of it or the tenacity or the whatever. It's just so touching. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know what it makes me so emotional for every time, but it just does.
Well, I think not to get too OTT and like highfalutin, but I think in the world right now, um, that's being forced on all of us
Hmm.
because no one who has any power is standing up. The only people standing up for anybody or against anything are the smallest amongst us.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is further proof there is nothing that I cannot use as a tool to attack Donald Trump, right? So let me use my tiny provincial story about the north of England and a dog to attack Donald Trump. But like, you know, the the bullies have never. It, Stephen Graham Jones talks about the horror novel and the slasher essentially being a fight back against the bully. He says, "Oh,
Yeah.
Jay Daniels. He and I talked about this. That it's about standing up to the bully. That's what these stories are about." And I think we've never lived in a world where the bully seems to be more immune to natural justice. Forget like legal justice.
Hmm.
We seem to live in a world in which increasingly the most powerful and by default the most corrupt amongst us seem to be completely immune, impervious, indifferent to the natural checks and balance of the moral universe, right? And
Yep.
um, and I feel like there's never been a time where, well, certainly not since the Second World War, where the idea of like the smallest acts of heroism mean something because no one who has any power is doing anything. So it's left to the rest of us to kind of stand up for what we believe in.
Hmm.
And I think that's a universal human trait across modern history, but it feels like it's really come to the fore now, very much so, that we are relying on ourselves and our small communities and our friendships, and because we cannot rely on the powers that be to stand up for us.
Yeah.
So I think we are all riot to a degree, or anybody who like, wants to make a difference. I think we are all riot. So I don't know if I was thinking about that when I wrote it. I think I just have a natural thing about I've always hated bullies. Even when I was in my teenage years and I was a bit of a dick, or I was a lot of a dick. The one thing I would never, I would did some shocking things, right? But the one thing I never, ever, ever did was I never participated in bullying. And I used to try and stop it whenever I could. Not in some like, oh, aren't you great? Give yourself a pat on the back, Neil. I couldn't stomach it. Um, so it's always been part of my DNA, even when I've got massive flaws in other moral parts of my life. I can't stand bullies. So I think that's what it might be. I think it may be that I just, like Stephen Graham Jones, I hate bullies, and I think horror is the perfect genre to show them getting there. If not their comeuppance, at least opposition.
Yeah.
God,
I
that
could.
is a over the top answer to a question.
No,
Sorry.
it's Neil, not at all. I think, I'm in the middle of listening to your episode with Wendy Wagner right now, and y'all
Hmm.
kind of talk about that with the environmentalism and, like we've never felt more isolated and we've never needed to be more united than now in terms of, accomplishing things on a ground level, and then that's how you inspire change on the bigger level. I don't think that that's if you believe in that, and as somebody who's spent a small amount of time with you, I know that you believe in that. You can't take that away from your essence and your personality, and that you're writing something as personal as this. That has to be part of it, right? Like it just comes through so naturally. I couldn't agree more with what you had to say about why it resonates so profoundly right now. But I think Good Boy is such an emotional novel for those reasons, and I think we all resonate with Jim and Riot and their stand against this thing and like the social responsibility aspect of it, right? Like the reason that Jim has stayed in this town, I'm not going to say what it is, but he feels an obligation to do it. And that's something that I think that a lot of us aspire to, and maybe we don't know if we would do it, when rubber meets the road. It's something that we would like to think that we would do, but we don't know if we would. And I think what you have to say about social responsibility and looking out for fellow man, there's a lot to be said for that, but there's also a lot to be said for looking out for yourself, and for Jim's sake, knowing when to let go and when to move
Hmm.
on. And I feel like that's a unique balance, right? Like, how do you balance social responsibility and vigilance versus this is not good for me, and this is what I need, to do to take care of me. That feels very weighty, right?
Yeah, too right, doesn't it, just? I mean, to the point where one of the things that I really struggle with, God, you're unlocking things here that I hadn't linked to this book, but I really struggle with the idea of like, you know, reading the news as
Yeah.
an act of participation in the social contract because
Yep.
um 2020 the 2023 into like the first half of 2024, I was just like this like I was just bathed in political discourse, and it was just horrendous because it does start to take a toll on your mental health because you live in this echo chamber where you forget that most people are going through their life not aware of the latest scandal or the latest transgression, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I made an active choice to not read the news as much. It actually happened when the day Trump, like when he won, I thought, you know what, fuck this. This is not useful information. I don't need to be imbibing this.
Mm-hmm.
But stepping back has made me feel tons better. But I do feel like I'm in some way betraying society by being someone with an intellect who is not taking part. I feel like have I become part of the apathetic masses who are, let's, and then they have led to this. And that's essentially like an incredibly passive version of what I mean. That's just reading the news, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not some brave activist. I've never once been on a protest, which makes me ashamed, right? I'm almost waiting for the next thing I can protest about so I can take part, right? But I've never been to a protest. I really think that is bad in this. If I've got to 41 and not be in the protest, it's like, have you been paying attention, Neil? Um, but Jim takes a very active role in social responsibility, and more importantly, takes an incredibly solitary role. The real heart of this novel, the great tragedy, is not that he has to give things up. It's he gives things up with no recognition and no community with which to do it, apart from Riot, which is why the bond is so strong. And I think that's the thing that makes him brave, is
Yeah.
that he doesn't get a pat on the back. And I think and that they're the real heroes, right? The people who are the real heroes amongst us are the people who are doing stuff with no recognition for it. And that's, I mean, to get on a particular hobby horse of mine, that's why I abhor this thing on social media that we get from certain elements of the horror community, where people say like, if something bad happens, people will say like, I've seen who's not been tweeting or who's not been
Yeah.
posting, and like, how dare you not post? And I'm like, well, who are you? And you don't know what people are doing, behind the scenes. Not everyone thinks that tweeting is the ultimate act of social rebellion. Some people are doing things, and they're doing it without any regard for social applause, right? And I think that's true heroism these days
Yeah.
because everything's done for clout, isn't it?
Oh
Everything
yeah.
is done, I mean, I do this shit, I post nice things. I know that it'll go down well. There are some great people who are doing things without any recognition. And I wanted to commemorate that kind of heroism.
You definitely did. It's heartbreaking to, and this I don't think this is a spoiler, but I'm gonna bring up Kath now. Which by the way, was that a nod to Never Let Me Go?
No, it's actually, I'll tell you something quite funny, right? This
Okay.
is actually genuinely funny. Um, well, I think it's funny. So, I said that the book is based on my dad's friend,
Yeah.
Jim, right? Jim Howarth. So in the book, fictional Jim in the book has a love interest called Catherine. Um, she was originally called Kathleen, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
her original name. And I changed it to Catherine when I realized that Kathleen was the real name of the real Jim's sister, which is
Oh,
doubly funny because the small town I come from, let's just say, has less chromosomal difference
yeah.
than it should. Yeah. Um, you know, quite a lot of cousins who know each other. Let's just say that. Now, and obviously Jim and Kathleen were not part, but it did seem like, oh God, I've tried, I've implied, no. So I changed the name to Catherine. No, I don't know where that's where it came from, really. It was a Freudian slip that I corrected towards the end.
That's no, that's a very funny story. But the reason that I ask is Stephanie from Books in the Freezer, I haven't read the book yet, but she had bullied me into watching the movie. She's like, "You've gone too long. You have to watch it." So I
Yeah.
watched the movie. And honestly, I see a lot of connective DNA between Good Boy and that narrative as well, but we'll get to that in a minute. But for Jim and Kath, their story is equally heartfelt and destructive in certain ways. I think that you do a really good job of demonstrating like quiet love or quiet companionship, especially between, Riot and Jim, but even more so with Kath and Jim. Was that a conscious choice to kind of write them that way? Or like what was the inspiration behind their dynamic and their relationship?
I that's a good question. I don't have thought about that. I mean, my first concern with Catherine is I it's my debut piece of long fiction,
Yeah.
right? And I've interviewed so many people that I'm aware of how poorly men sometimes write women. So I probably got in my own head a bit much.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't want to make her into somebody who was only valuable because she was beautiful,
Hmm.
which is why I wanted to be an artist. And she's somebody who is morally very strong.
Yep.
And also for the time, because this is a period piece, she's not to be reckoned with, you know. But also she's not some unrealistic, you know, ball busting
Yeah.
glass ceiling brick, because that something like that would not come from a town like this. So I wanted to really thread that needle and make her realistically defiant, without being a sort of idealized version of young womanhood. Um, but their relationship, I think I was very aware that the book could t tend towards melodrama if I wasn't
Yeah.
careful, because it plays with a lot of big emotions. You know, it's
Hmm.
like a lot of the emotion in this isn't subtle. It's
Yeah.
very in your face. And I think the relationship between Riot and Jim is so strong and so full of pathos, hopefully, if I do say so myself, that
Yep.
I want the other relationship to be quieter and sadder and a little bit more resigned, you know, because when I read, I'm a sucker for sort of country songs and alt country, right? So like Jason
Yeah.
Isbell and people like that. And my favorite and I care about lyrics. I love narrative love songs that aren't
Hmm.
just platitudinous, but actually tell a story.
Yeah.
Um, and my favorite kind of love song is the resigned love song. Not like the great heartbreak. I love the songs where often the male singer has loved and lost and is kind of resigned to it. Still sad, but not in the raw furnace of grief. So, for example, like my favorite song of all time is Bruce Springsteen's The River, which
Hmm.
is a very pragmatic look at what a small town life does to a relationship. Um, I also think the saddest line in all of music, it just cuts me open, is in the Cranberries' Linger,
Oh my God.
when the line where she just sings, I thought the world of you, and it just, oh my God, right? You know,
I
because
have chills right now. Oh yeah.
it's
Hmm.
so resigned to loss. Like I thought the world of you and it's over.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I wanted to catch some of that, like not the raw, heady, adolescent, everything is like barbed wire to your soul love.
Yeah.
More the slow letting go of happiness, I think is what I want to capture.
I think that you did for sure. And you say that, the things with Riot are like really the relationship with Riot, the love with Riot is like really in your face but I would say also there's some very small gestures that cut me deeply. Namely, I'll just say a tennis ball reduced me to
Hmm.
tears. You do a good job. I think you just do a very good job of imposing this greater essence of like making the reader understand the greater implication of this very big thing with such a small thing. And I think that's very powerful because you're not having to be heavy-handed at that point, right? You're letting it breathes a little bit naturally if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and that scene with the tennis ball, there's a lot of things with this story that came to me sort of serendipitously.
Hmm.
So there is a reason that a tennis ball is in a certain field at a certain time, and it comes back into play later in the story as a sort of, a bit of closure. And that poured out of me at about 4:30 in the morning when I've been writing all night, and I didn't plan it. It just was one of those happy accidents. But everyone has mentioned that as the sort of emotional climax of the piece. Not actually there is a certain moment that you think would be, and actually, weirdly, the tennis ball has been much more of an impactful thing for people. And yeah, it was complete happy, sort of accidental coming together of strands that just felt right at the time. So yeah, I'm pleased with that.
Yeah. I have one little question for you.
Mm.
Where was Ted when you were writing all this? Was he next to you or was he in bed?
He was often
Sneak-
in bed. He was often in
sneak-
bed, but wondering where I was because he can't really sleep if I'm not there.
Yeah.
But yeah, but he does sit under my desk a lot. But I have a
Yeah.
picture of him on my desk here that I look at constantly.
Perfect.
Um, but yeah, no, he was in bed with my wife sleeping,
Yeah.
snoring generally.
As they do. Oh man. I think that wraps up about all of my specific questions for Good Boy. And I have like
Mhm.
kind of one general question. It feels a little cheeky, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. You've talked obviously to a lot of writers and your presence in the horror community, at least from where I'm sitting, has felt super influential within the last however many years it's been. In fact, like I would not be the horror reader that I am today. I would not be doing what I'm doing today without you and what you've done. What is one piece of it can be like a piece of advice that you've gotten for a writer. It could be an experience that you've had. What's the biggest takeaway from doing Talking Scared and all this that you think has impacted this book and this process?
Well, that's a good question. I should have had an answer for that, shouldn't I? Because I've been given so much advice over the years.
Oh my God.
Um,
But I think that's what makes it overwhelming, right? Like you've talked to so many people, you've made so many connections, right?
yeah, I two people have been. Well, I've had a lot of people, right? I've had a lot of people kind of come into my life and become friends and be cheerleaders. And how lucky I feel with the blurbs I've got for this book, right? Like
Yeah.
King blurbed it, like, Stephen Graham Jones blurbed it. Chuck Wendig just sent me a lovely blurb. I've been so lucky to kind of build these connections with people willing to read my debut novella and like it. But two people who have inspired me more than anyone else. The two that I mean, Nat Cassidy is my bro, right? Nat Cassidy just like read this early, loved it. Nat Cassidy keeps me breathing a lot of the time. But the
Yeah.
two people who have in different ways have influenced me, Josh Malerman
Hmm.
lights a fire inside me that I cannot credit him enough for because the man is like this he's like a nuclear meltdown of creative inspiration, right? He's like nuclear fission given flesh, right?
Yeah.
Just every time I talk to him, I don't know if you've spoken to Josh yet, but if not, you should. Every time I've spoken to Josh, he's just he effervesces and it's infectious and he's made me feel like well I can do this because he has no doubt that someone can do it. He has no doubt that he can do it. He's a man who is undaunted by expectation or the normal limitations of like human existence. He just kind of barrels through.
Yeah.
And Josh just like keeps me ticking. And the other person who was probably giving me more decent practical advice. Well, there's two people, like another two people. Gemma Amore gives me more kind of hands-on, gritty, practical advice than you could ever ask for. More than I ask for sometimes, but I welcome it all. And Rachel Harrison, like Rachel was the literal first person to read Good Boy, not even my wife. And she came back with this like praise and she's sort of guided my decision making to the point now where I think if I'm given a situation, it's like, well, what would Rachel do? Because yeah, she's bossing it. That doesn't really answer your question about one piece of advice. There's the three people who have like guided, been my creative north stars as such. Um, I can't nail one person, but overall, um, and I'm sorry, it is a really basic bitch answer, but people who tell you just to keep going, right?
Yeah.
That it will feel terrible
Yeah.
until it doesn't, and I think that's the thing because to get out of my own way and
Hmm.
to get out of the sense of like this has to be, I have to finish this before I can do that. No, just keep doing it. And it's not just the whole keep writing every day thing. It's not that. It's the acceptance that it will feel dreadful until suddenly it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I started writing the next thing, right? And it feels dreadful again. It feels like I couldn't possibly tell this story. But I thought that when I was writing Good Boy, and I think that's the faith that it will feel shit until suddenly it doesn't. And that
Hmm.
is like, for me at least, is like an overnight thing. It's not a gradual incremental. It's like, oh, no, I've written 40,000 pages of nonsense, and then on the 41st thousand words, you're like, oh no, this is pretty good. Oh, it's going
Yeah.
somewhere at least. I can land it. Yeah, I think that's the thing.
Yeah. That's a I really, first of all, I have to say I met Gemma for the first time at Stoker this year, and she's everything that you could hope for and more, and like
Mm,
just, she's incredible. And Rachel is somebody I've had the pleasure of getting to know really well, and she's somebody that's incredibly special as well. So I can see why you would have them in your corner like that. But also to the advice to keep going. I think it's this weird thing that I've been picking up lately in fiction, and I've talked to Stephen Graham Jones about it in his work, but devotion, right?
hmm
Like devotion to the craft, and then like also to a degree, and not in a narcissistic way, but devotion to yourself and like the faith in yourself, not in this like weird religious egotistical way, but in
hmm
this like very poetic just confidence of like
Yeah.
returning to it and having faith that it'll work out. I
hmm
think that that's probably been the coolest thing to see unfold in my journey with horror fiction, you know?
And I also just interviewed Daniel Kraus, and I know that you're reading
Yeah.
Angel Down right now. And Daniel and I talk, that episode will go live. Well, this actually months before this will. Anyway, ignore that. Um, But he and I talk about the importance of the sentence
Yeah.
and the importance of caring about the words. And Good Boy strives for a degree of, I don't know, prose style, I guess, or at least like imagery or originality that I think that is important. And, people who really take the time, not just to tell a good story, but to tell a good story well and
Hmm.
to take some time and not, I suppose, you don't ever want writing to get in the way of a good story, but you also don't want a good story to become more important than the writing also. And I think I
Yeah.
read a lot of books sometimes where I'm like, this is a great story, but I wish I like a little bit more in the words, and I think like that kind of distinctive voice, which Daniel definitely has, and I
Yes.
obviously aim for in my own way, that I think that's important and will be more important as we get more and more and more horror writers, have to have your own kind of care over the prose that makes it emphatically yours, which
Yeah.
that Daniel has, Stephen Graham Jones has, people like that really have. Yeah, care about your sentences, people. Care about your words. They matter.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Man, I feel like we've hit on everything, and this has been a really, really wonderful conversation. I appreciate you opening up and being as, thoughtful as you have been with your answers. I know that you think that you're too wordy, but you're not. Um, is there anything that I'm gonna pull at you right now. Is there anything that you're reading right now that you feel like is really like influencing you or motivating you, like really just doing it for you?
Well, I'm rereading a tiny little, you may not have heard of it, The Stand. Yeah, no, I'm rereading that for the Dark Tower deep dive, and it obviously that book is just like that is the the what it's the Moby Dick of horror. It's
Yeah.
the it's book is everything. If you can't be inspired by reading The Stand, just stop reading books and take a sport. Um, but I've read so Daniel's book, Angel Down, Daniel Krause's book inspired me like hugely. What a book that is! What a phenomenal piece of art that book is. Like it's a level of actual technical writing that I think so few of us could ever aspire to. My God, the gymnastics that he performs with
Oh yeah.
words. I mean, without ever seeming pompous, right? That's the thing. Without ever seeming like he's trying to alienate the reader. It's
No,
just,
he's being very relatable, actually. He's
yeah,
taking like very crass, like normal things that we all think and like spinning them beautifully. And I'm like, how in the hell are you pulling this off?
yeah. It's an incredible book. And I also just read, um, actually, I've got two more things to mention. I just read King's Sorrow.
Yes.
Have you read it yet?
No, it's coming up for me though.
It's so good.
Okay.
It's so good because I love Joe Hill, right? I
Yeah.
really love Joe Hill. I love his short fiction. Since Heart-Shaped Box, I've not read a novel of his that I've wholly loved.
Yeah.
Like I enjoyed Nosferatu. I didn't like The Fireman,
Hmm.
but this one, I mean, he's taken 10 years off to write it, but my God, it's the kind of book they don't write anymore. Like it's like,
Yeah.
really elaborate, characterful sort of like setup, and then these each sort of lengthy section each one's like an amazing set piece.
Hmm.
It will make like the best Netflix like mini series of 6 episodes. It would, oh my God, it's such a good book. And the other thing I read that is coming to mind more and more and more, and for a very specific reason, is V.E. Schwab's Bury Our Bodies in the Midnight Soil, Bury Our
Ye-
Bones in the Midnight Soil.
Yep. I picked up a copy of it, but it's another big one and it's like not in my rotation for like podcasting, so I'm like I have to take a break to read it and I
Mm.
really want to read it because everybody's been saying tremendous things about it.
So the reason I've mentioned this, and it's this is my platform to make one of my patented TED Talks, right, is
Yeah.
that it it does something that no one else is doing, in that it's not trying to reinvent a wheel. Right. I just went on a big rant about this on my Patreon. I did an AMA thing for my patrons, and I spent about 50 minutes like just haranguing them on this point. But I think horror has got a bit obsessed by reinventing every aspect of itself with every
Yep.
book. I mean, there's some great, high concept fiction. Daniel Krauss writes them, but it feels like everyone now is trying to go like, okay, what can I bring that's completely a unique spin of the vampire or the haunted house or the zombie or this, that, the other, right? And V. Schwab has gone, no, no, I'm going to write a vampire story, and they're going to be kind of like quite typical vampires. And it's going to be a fairly what you'd expect from a vampire's narrative.
Hmm.
But I'm just going to tell it really well with
Yeah.
great characters and an interesting story and genuine emotion. And you don't need for this to be something groundbreaking in a tropey sense. And I'm like, round of applause, Victoria, because I want more books that are just good versions. Just tell a good horror story, right?
Yep.
Um, Rachel Harrison's Play Nice is a haunted house story. And this is not decrying it to say that it's not trying to do anything incredibly new. I mean, it's very recognizable if you watched all the haunted house movies of the 70s, like Amityville Horror. It's very
Hmm.
recognizable, but it's really well told with a great central character. Like, I want more of that. I want more people going like, let's just tell a good story rather than trying to think of the perfect high context elevator pitch.
Yeah.
So V. Schwab did that to like on a grand canvas with Bury Our Bones. So that inspired me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's something really special for whenever, and because people crave comfort, right? Like we
Mm,
want to go back to the familiar. And I think whenever you can accomplish something like that, like, and the only thing I have to go off of is Play Nice because I've read that one. Like I love the certain beats that Rachel hits with that book, but because it's Cleo and it's set now,
yeah.
that's what I love about it. Like it's just like it can be that simple that it's just
Mm,
relatable because it's now. So
yeah.
I very much am on the same page with you on that. But I'm hoping to get to that one midnight bury our bones in the midnight soil sooner rather than later, but we'll see how that shakes out. Well, Neil, is there anything that you can say about anything that you're working on now? I mean, obviously you have the podcast. It's always a big year for the podcast. I mean, you are probably one of the busiest people I know in terms of reading and doing work for the podcast. Obviously, Good Boy comes out in October from Wild Hunt Books, but what does the rest of your year look like?
So this when is this going live, by the way?
I'm probably going to hold it closer to
Right.
publication day.
So
So,
it's July now.
yeah.
When we're recording this. Sorry to destroy the illusion of time travel there,
Oh
guys,
no.
but I I have made a decision this year. Now, I've said this a few times before, so I understand people's reluctance to believe me. Um, but I am committing to writing because Good Boys Coming Out, it seems to be doing quite well in the run-in and seems to be exceeding what I expected from it, so I kind of want to capitalize. So I'm working on a few things. I've got a short story coming out in the Taylor Swift anthology from LP Hernandez. My story's going to be about Cardigan. But I've started writing my next thing, which is this hopefully novel length thing that is my take on possession. Now I've just realised I'm being a massive hypocrite because I've just said the whole thing about like not trying to reinvent the wheel, and I'm doing a thing where I'm going like, what's my take on the possession trope? So I have no defence there. I am a hypocrite. Yes, there's no follow-up. I'm just a hypocrite. Um, but I'm writing this book about a woman who's possessed, and I've now got a nice new agent that I'm excited to work with, and I'm going to basically take 6 months. Here's the thing. I'm going to keep making the podcast, but normally I like make the podcast as like a side gig, and then I have my like day job as a copywriter and as a bit of journalism and all that. I
Yeah.
am aggressively turning down almost all work other than the podcast, which makes some money, and I'm going to write for 6 months because my dad died and left me like a little bit of cash to sort of supplement the mortgage payments. And my wife's incredibly considerate and patient woman. And I'm going to basically try and get in the habit of writing and try and smash out a novel draft while still making the podcast. And it'll be about a woman who is possessed and things
I
happen. And there's a cute dog in that book as well.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
I do think you have accomplished something really, really special with Good Boy. I know that there's a lot of people kind of saying that, but I hope that you're believing people when they say that because I do think it's a very special novella, especially as a debut. And everybody, it's always impressive to me whenever you can do something like what you do in the novella format, right? Like that length. It's the efficiency. It's we talked a little bit about that already, but it's special. No doubt about it. So I'm all for you taking the 6 months to write whatever it is that you need to write because I will be the first in line to want to read whatever comes next. But no, that's great. I mean, everybody know I love Talking Scared. I love what you do on the podcast, so everybody needs to go listen to that if they're not already. Pre-order Good Boy if this happens to come out a little bit before. If not, just go regular order it. It comes out in October from Wild Hunt Books as part of their Northern Weird project. Is there anything that we did not talk about that you wanted to bring up before we wrap this up?
No, there isn't. I want to celebrate Wild Hunt again for doing this because we need more recognition of not just Northern writers, but more recognition of the north of
Yeah.
England as a really interesting place to write about. And I think what that collection of stories does really well is, reflect the variety of life in this relatively small part of the world,
Hmm.
and the eeriness that we live with day in, day out. So absolute credit to them for doing it in the first place. And thank you to everyone who has read it and is willing to read it and is willing to buy it because it actually comes out on my birthday too, which is just too perfect. So if you need a further sort of, motivation to get a copy. It's kind of a birthday present to me. So yeah, thanks very much. But no, this has been great, Anna. This is like I say, it's the first time I talked about this. So thank you for letting me sort of find my feet. I always say I do things I think in the doing, and I've had to think whilst talking here. You've been very kind of, patient with me.
No, look, this is what this podcast is here for, and I think that your responses were amazing, and I am very thankful that I know you and like that I have you in my sphere of people that I can, I feel like I've taken a lot of like what I've learned about interviewing from you. And so I think that it's really cool to see you embark on this journey as a writer and just see where it goes. And it's the coolest thing. I don't know if it's weird for me to say like I'm proud of you, but
No,
I
that's fine.
am.
No, no, please,
I
please. Yeah,
very
that's
much
great.
am. I think that this is a
But let me
huge
flip this
thing.
around. What's this 20K word that you smashed out in like
Oh,
overnight?
oh God. Well, I'm still working on it. It's basically it's kind of ironically enough, it's like if it met the death of like physical media. I've been like thinking about like the decline of physical media and how hard it is to like get your hands on certain like movies and pieces of television. And I grew up in a small town that held on to its Blockbuster like way past the time that a lot of like our Blockbuster didn't close till 2013.
Okay.
Um, and so it is very much about that. And it's supposed to I'm trying to pull a U and make it culturally relevant to where I'm from because I don't feel like there's enough of our stories either. Um, so yeah, essentially it's just like what would happen if like we had a Pennywise character that lived in the DVD return slot at Blockbuster.
That's
You
amazing.
know.
And
So
but you're right, it's fast. I mean, the words are flying.
yeah, I did like another 2 or 3 thousand last night, and I'm probably gonna work on it again today. I don't. It may not be anything. My goal for myself is I've never once finished a draft of anything fiction wise, like
Hmm.
beyond like a little short, little whatever. So I just want to finish it. Like I don't really. I'm trying to, much like you. It's really funny that you said what you said about Good Boy and just like having to let go of the perfectionism and like getting out of your own way,
Yeah.
because that is
Yeah.
100% what I've struggled with, and I'm just letting it rip and whatever. If it's usable in the end, that's great. If not, I at least got it done. So that's my
Well, I look forward to reading it in whatever form we finally see it. That sounds wicked.
thank you, Neil. Well, thank you again for your time, your answers, and I hope that this was okay for the first go round, but I think this has been a lovely conversation and I can't thank you enough.
No, thank you. It's good to know you. It's fun watching you do what I do, but better and
Oh,
annoyingly earlier in your life. It irritates the hell out of me that you're doing this when you're like, what, 15 or something? And I'm like, yeah, I yeah. So it's a pleasure to be interviewed by you. No one else I'd rather do this with for the first time.
well, I appreciate that very, very much, Neil. Thank you.
All right.
So I guess you can't ever take the interviewer or the inter you can't ever stop interviewing is what I'm trying to say because Neil does ask me some questions of his own about me and what I've been up to at the end of this episode, which was recorded back in July. So this is a bit dated, but to everything else, it was a absolutely lovely conversation. I still feel so honored that I was the first person to get to interview Neil about this book. I think that it's a big testament that he came on and chatted about it with me. And I just hope that I handled, the questions and the content of the book with as much grace as he writes that story with, because dear God, is it such a good book. I pray and hope that everybody goes out and picks up Good Boy, gives it a good solid read. It's such a good story. I can't emphasize that enough. And Neil is a British guy, so of course he's not one to really accept compliments, but I can assure you that everything that I have to say about this book is so true. I love it immensely, and I do seriously hope that you all pick it up and read it and enjoy it. Um, a huge thanks to just Neil in general, because he's one of the first people that, kind of recognized me, came on my YouTube channel back in the YouTube days, did an interview with me last summer, had me on his podcast at the end of last year for the year-end recap, and has kind of just, been around ever since. So I meant what I said whenever I feel like I've learned a lot from him, and I do really mean it, that I'm like so proud of him, and like getting to see all this happen is just the coolest thing. So to all of that, just to reiterate again, could not be more thrilled for him. Now, back down to business, moving forward, looking to next week. I will be sharing my interview with Gemma Amore. We will be chatting about her book, Itch, which is such a phenomenal book. I mean, just like firing on all cylinders, checking every single one of my boxes about female rage in some ways, uncomfortability in a female body based on our experiences and our trauma, the sake of tradition and if it holds up in our modern world and what purpose it serves us. I mean, there's so many things that we talk about. I can go on and on and on. It's such a good chat. I'm so thankful to Gemma for coming on the show, and I cannot wait to let that one loose in the world on the heels of this interview, which I, again, reiterate, I love dearly. So yeah, we're gonna have the UK people do a back-to-back double feature here with Neil this week, Gemma next week, and who's to say who knows who's coming the following? I mean, I do, but I like to keep you all on your toes. So stay tuned for the remainder of my schedule for the year. Thank you all for listening. You all are a treat and a delight, and it's been a pleasure getting to know the horror community the way that I have in these last few months. And yeah, I'm just feeling super grateful today as I record this